Hey everybody, so I got another crazy hard hat hair talk for you all. My topic today that I want to focus on is just like tips for roping commercial rooms, pretty much. And this can take the forms of needing to do the jumpers between in conduit, like EMT, like hard pipe, or in MC. So I guess my first tip will be know your ceiling height. So your ceiling height is going to allow you to know when you can pop up and out of the wall. So it's also important that you know what type of ceiling you'll be dealing with. So for example, if you have a hard lid ceiling, you will not be catching your home run in a box in that room, because after you go ahead and rope the area, the entire ceiling is going to be sealed off forever unless they make a access hatch. So if someone tells you that something is going to be a hard lid, just verify if a box can be set in that room. And typically, home run boxes will be thought of beforehand, but sometimes it's on the fly. They're like, go ahead and set a 411 or 4S box over there, and we'll just catch the home run for these 2-3 receptacles later on. So yeah, that's a really good question. Is there a hard lid, and also what height is the ceiling, or if it's a drop ceiling. So there's a bunch of ceiling tiles that you can literally lift up off of the grid and poke your head up in there. That makes it a lot more workable than a hard lid, because you can just go right up to it with a ladder and poke your head up. But one consideration to think about with running pull boxes or just junction points in a T-grid drop ceiling is that you might not physically be able to access whatever height you install the box at, depending on if the T-grid is like super low. Like, let's say your ceiling height is like 16 feet, right? But your T-grid is at like 9 feet. You might be like, how the heck do I get up there? You'd have to stick an A-frame that has to be narrower than the tile, and then even then, you don't have the greatest, reach off that ladder to go ahead and access the things that you're looking to reach. So that's also something to consider. Like, is the T-grid going to be at an absurdly low height? And if so, think about what height you're mounting your boxes at, because even if you're able to get one of those small one-man lifts in there, you might, you could save yourself some time if you just knew that beforehand, and then you wouldn't have to potentially rent a special piece of equipment or needed a special ladder to access that box later. So, we haven't even got into actually putting wire in yet, and we're still wondering about, how do I do this? So, there's a bunch of things that can contribute to, how you go ahead and start roping a room. So these things are almost like necessities to know. So they are necessities to know. Like, in each job, you have to figure out, you want to look at a reflected ceiling plan, you want to look at elevations on your blueprints, and if you can't get that, you want to, before you get let loose on a room, you want to make sure that you know these things, because otherwise it's going to be a mess. Another thing that would be really helpful for you to know is if it's a fire rated wall that you're working on, and if that's the case, if they have like a 2-hour fire rated wall, they might want you to go around it completely, because they don't want to have to explain that to the inspector that there's fire caulking and all this other stuff in a 2-hour fire rated wall. So on special situations like that, it's not like you can't go through those materials. It's just that they'd rather you didn't, because it's kind of like a no-no. So making sure that if you are going through walls that are fire rated, that you go ahead and fire caulk, make a note that someone has to go back there and do that, especially if it's in like a really weird angle, like make sure, or like a really weird position, like make sure that there's not another alternative. So those are a couple of tips. Another thing would be to look at the building structure. Like if you have, a lot of the times in commercial buildings, the steel studs that go into the wall that form like rooms are not structural. A lot of the times. There can be, totally. But a lot of the times the weight of the building is supported by the structural steel members that are on the building. So like the spans between like certain types of roof structures can be much greater than like in a residential sense, where you have like a truss on every 2 foot or less, so keeping that information in mind is really helpful for planning out like how you're going to hang this conduit. Like if you're working with a bunch of beams that are in the shape like an I-beam, you might want to consider finding some beam clamps so that you can work around having to drill into any material. And again, if you have I-beams, another thing that would be helpful is using beam clamps. So if you have a bunch of beam clamps, that's going to help you out a lot with not having to drill into stuff. Another thing would be like, let's say it's all wood trusses. You might need a different hanger than you would if it was a metal structure. So certain places you'll have both materials, and so you just need to like make a note when you're getting the material of what type of material you need to actually do the install. So it's an important thing to note. There's also, for instance, ceilings. Certain ceilings can't be drilled through, so that's like important to take note of. So for instance, like if you have a commercial building that has multiple levels or multiple floors, you might want to ask, if we can drill into the top deck or the ceiling. Like in certain places, like if you were, like let's say you're going to do a concrete SAMI, which has like a 2-inch concrete anchor, metal, screw that anchors it into the concrete. You want to make sure that you drill into a part of the top deck that has enough like concrete to accept that. You don't want to have it's not a shiner, but like a shiner poking through to the floor of the second floor. So that's an important thing to note. I guess as a tip, you generally want to, if you have a corrugated ceiling, you generally want to go into the lowest part of the corrugated ceiling. Lowest meaning closest to you or closest to like the ground, because it makes a sort of wave W shape, and so you don't want to go up here because it's closer to poking through, so you want to go down here because there's more concrete to accept the SAMI. So so if you're working in a ceiling like that, or if you're on like the last floor before the roof, you want to make sure that you're drilling into what you're drilling into isn't going to literally make a shiner through the roof. There's a lot of weatherproofing and waterproofing processes that go into making sure that the laminated decking that they put on there is non-permeable. So asking these questions is super helpful in A, not costing your company money, and B, not getting fired, but also just in general for making good decisions for your conduit runs. I guess another thing as well would be knowing where your studs are before you go, and this is more so for a finished room. So if you have a finished room, you're going to need to know where you're like, you can't just go ahead and start throwing a bunch of pipes on a rack and then just run them wherever you want, because you're going to run into a lot of things in the way. So hopefully the layout of all these rooms, like I was working at a fire station before, and the dorms for the firefighters were all lined up. There was like 10 in a row, so you had like 10 little rooms that were all set up and already finished. I guess the GC didn't really care that a lot of our conduits were not in yet, and so we got thrown into the like this fire caulking, like drywall dust insulation mess, and we had to just like deal with it. So like you'd have to build full racks of like 10, 15 pipes, and you'd be penetrating through like probably like 20, if not more, because some were double sheetrocked, layers of drywall just to complete like one end of the building to the other end of the building racks. So that's really important too. Like, know where your studs are. You don't have to carry around like, yeah. So yeah, if you have a bunch of conduits that need to go into a room, try to make sure that the spacing fits into like, 14 inches or something. Something that like is just narrower than the width of a stud bay, so that it's easier to go through the drywall. That way, you don't have to drill through a stud or, compromise any structural integrity to a wall by having to drill through a stud. So that's a good tip, I would say. Also, again, another tip for finished drywall is always having long self-tappers or long wood screws on you, because you're going to come across the time when everyone just has a bunch of shorty metal self-tappers, and then they're like, well, how do we run this? And I don't know why that is a thing, but it is certainly a thing. And so I'm definitely a hoarder whenever it comes to a bunch of drywall screws laying on the ground. I always grab all of them. I may kind of talk about this in a past video, but if you ever see it on the ground, just like grab your magnetic tape and just walk around like a person with a walking stick, picking up the little pieces on the magnetic end, and then just grab them all and put them in your material storage spot that you keep for yourself, and you won't have to be looking for that material as often if you just kind of keep an eye and make a note of it, that you should always be looking for those things. So that having those screws is really helpful as well for a finished room. Another thing would be the top plate of walls. Sometimes top plates, like I said, there's no structural value to some of the studs that are in a room other than to form the shape of the room. Like, they don't hold the roof up. So because of that, sometimes the top plate only goes, a little bit. So like, you might be running a pipe rack and then you run into a top plate and you're like, crap. So like, making note of what height the top plates are at can be really helpful. So that's another thing to make note of. Also, kind of in the same vein, there's also some trusses that have like cross members. Like, you'll have like certain parts of it are open but others aren't, and hopefully you can get trusses that are stacked the same way, so that they're sort of uniform in how they're laid out, so that you can like see all the way through, all the way down. Like, there's a window that keeps its same like positioning all throughout. And so but sometimes in commercial, sort of like a finishing sort of talking about like finishes and working with that, is there's something called monocoat, which is a steel fireproofing. And I don't really know how to describe it other than if you put a bunch of ash in a water slurry and then let it dry and then just threw it on the ceiling. Like, that's what it looks like. It's very messy, probably super cancerous, so don't breathe it in. But a lot of the dead airspace in trusses will be filled. They'll put like a mesh over the truss, and then after they put the mesh over the truss, they'll monocoat the crap out of the thing, and it'll look like a solid piece. So if you see that, like it's fireproofing, so you don't want to like expose too much steel. But if you need to, just know that that's just monocoat, and you know, if you need to make a space on a beam for a beam clamp, go ahead and do that. But also make sure that the GC is okay with you breaking up the monocoat. So that's like a good thing to note. Like again, anything that's fireproofing, you should always like have a little bit of hesitation with, because it's not really there's a little bit of crossover with our trade and doing fireproofing, but there's not always, it's not 100% sure on your part with certain cases when individuals do not want the fireproofing. You know, the AHJ that is inspecting the work might have an insanely to the book sort of perspective, and if they see something that's installed after a monocoat, they will be like super mad. So you're supposed to cover it up afterwards, but does that always happen? It does not. So just kind of putting that out there, like if there's fireproofing involved, you should probably ask your foreman or your GC if they're cool with you breaking into the monocoat. So yeah, that's another good tip for just getting into the space of thinking about how to rope this room. So like there's a bunch of questions that can go into this very simple, like, oh, let me just walk in and put wires in the wall. Like there can be so many things that are like impediments to you doing the very simple task that you were just trying to do. For instance, you might be like for instance, today I was roping a bunch of lights in an open area, but ceiling elevations, although it was a widely open area, really prevented much in terms of like being able to actually run pipe just straight, because they want to be able to rope these lights in pipe. And so it'd be super easy for us, especially with the way that it's being done, to just do straight runs of pipe, because there's like 80 lights. So if we have to like, and it's only suspended by a little caddy clip that goes into the top deck and then comes down with all thread, and it's just 1/4 inch all thread. So this stuff is like super doesn't retain its shape, you know, goes like, if it's been sagging in the sun for a while, it's gonna look all C-shaped or banana shaped and not really like have a good nice shaped end product for the whole job. So like yeah, so like other things to keep in mind, in particular with my scenario that I'm dealing with, is like checking what other trades ran their stuff at, because you want to get the whole picture first. And if you can't get the whole picture of like, oh, it looks like the AC guys ran their ducts all at 15 feet, but I was thinking about running my pipes at 15 feet and their ducts like 18 inches or 2 feet, so I guess I got to go up or down. And then you're like, okay, well, my ceiling height is 13 feet. You know, what height am I going to run this at? And so, you know, coming up to the point of answering that question and just starting work can be like crazy. Yeah, so, and especially when you're doing something for basically trying to do it in the simplest way possible, when time is, you know, when you're doing something like assembly line sort of style, like there's a bunch of things and you just got to get them in. Doing it the fastest way possible and coming up with a plan beforehand can really save you a lot of time. So just knowing elevations of other thing. If like a fire sprinkler pipe is at this height, it might be that height all the way throughout. If you see like other trade stuff, just like know that if you have a route from A to B, that you should probably take into account if that run changes heights, if it's going to affect you. And you can only do this so much, but just knowing what other people's heights are at, and if there's like a big plumbing stack near where you're going to work, maybe you guys should hold off till they finish. Or usually fire sprinkler pipe guys get precedence in terms of like they get like the right of way in terms of installing their stuff. So like if there's like a conduit rack that you guys are considering doing, and it's not something that was like done in like architectural plans, and you didn't really plan for it, like, you know, definitely something to consider. So definitely kind of a very drawn out sort of video today. So I didn't really even go into installing. It's just like all the things that come into thinking about roping a room. So there's definitely more that I could have gone into, but this video is already absurdly long. So I guess I'll go ahead and end it there. But if you guys have any recommendations for videos or anything, or any other comments on this or tips that you know,